Can you all hear me okay? Yeah. Great. Oh, I love it when people raise their hands in the back, so I know. Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm very excited this evening to talk with John Munice about Franz Josef Ponstingl. And I know that some of you have seen the exhibition. I see some familiar faces of docents here who have already given tours of the exhibition. But for those of you who don't know who Franz Josef Ponstingl is, he's an artist born in Allentown, grew up in Coopersburg, Pennsylvania. He served in the Korean War and World War II. And when he came back from the war, I think he was profoundly affected by what he saw there. And many of his paintings capture his experience of war, of seeing the aftermath of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, and also just his general, experience of technology and visions of a dystopian world in the 1960s and 70s. And it's really amazing work, and I hope if you haven't seen the exhibition yet, that you will take the time to do so and check it out. So really, this exhibition would not be here today if it wasn't for John Munice. He has avidly collected Ponstingl's work for nearly 15 years. And I don't think he would disagree with me if I would describe him as borderline obsessed with Ponstingl. And many works that are up in our current exhibition are from John's own private collection. So John has been in touch with the museum about Ponstingl for several years now, wondering if we would be able to show the work and bring Ponstingl's vision to a wider audience. And some of you might have seen a few paintings by Ponstingl in the 2016 exhibition, Death of Impressionism. There were two, and in fact, I can even bring them up now. These two works that aren't in our current exhibition were up in our Putnam Smith Gallery, flanking the Powell door. They're huge, so they couldn't really fit, unfortunately, in our current exhibition. But I came to the Michener this past July, as many of you know, and I came with, absolutely no knowledge of Ponstingl. For background on me, I have a background in 19th century American art, so this is a little bit out of my comfort zone. And I met John soon after I started here because we had an opening in our exhibition schedule for early 2020, and I heard John had some cool paintings by an artist that was into surrealism and sci-fi. So I thought, yeah, okay, we'll check this out. And I was totally astounded by John's collection, which is displayed throughout his house. And what particularly I thought was inspiring and touching was the way John described Ponstingl and his work. And I think you'll be able to tell this evening how enthusiastic and excited John is about this artist. But he's also, in some ways, I think, protective of Ponstingl, which was especially intriguing to me. So he doesn't want Ponstingl to be pigeonholed as this kind of weird artist working on the fringe, but he instead wants to bring Ponstingl, more into the general conversation of art of this time in the 60s and 70s. And he wants Ponstingl to be recognized for his skill and his vision and his ability to create these fantastic worlds through his paintings. So I've had, many conversations with John leading up to the exhibition and since it's been open about Ponstingl. But every time I talk to him, I learn something new. So I'm very much looking forward to our conversation this evening, and also we will have some time for questions from you to pose to either John or I about Ponstingl and his work. So thank you so much, John, for being here and agreeing to speak with us. So I thought we could start maybe by telling us a little bit about your interest in art and collecting in general.
Maybe about 20, 30 years ago, I have a passion for old homes, old cars, and a friend of mine said, do you know many paintings I can stash under a bed or on my walls? And the light bulb went off. And he said, I'm not going to talk to you about it anymore until you learn. So it was starting to obsess on the reading, learning about art and artists, traveling the world, going to museums, and that's kind of how the addiction started.
And how did you first come across Ponstingl? And what about his art appealed to you?
So Ed in our office is a big Dali fan. And he knows okay, I can love and respect Dali. One day, he was looking on Rego's website, and he saw an image of Ponstingl, one of the paintings that had sold 15, 20 years ago. He came over to my desk, he pulled up the image, he said, what do you think? Your friends at Rego just sold this. It was an image, I wish we could find it, an alien landscape of an alien family. Martian, I don't know, it was the strangest thing. People with round heads and round trees, and it was the most, and on some kind of a funky alien horse, and little kids. It blew me away. So that's where it started. I, from there, called Regos, and I said, could you find out who bought that painting, if they'd sell it? Not that it went for a lot of money, but if I would offer them $10,000, $20,000, they said they wouldn't sell it. And that's when the exploration started. I started talking to local dealers, and all the dealers knew about Ponstingl, the local dealers, how he was fun and whimsical, and this art was, sometimes it would show up at Brown Brothers or Alderfer's, and it was real affordable and fun. So I kept going, and then the people at Rego called back and they said, you know what, John, Bert Baum's estate, David Baum, is still alive, and he has some pieces. You might want to call Larry Grimm, and he handles the estate. He was related to the Baums, and go over and take a look in Sellersville. So I went to the home. It was in an interesting state, and he said, you're more than welcome to walk through the house. It took me about 2 hours. We found about 10 to 13 paintings, and there was one in particular I looked at, and I said, and a lot of these pieces from when Baum, I'm going to bounce around a little bit, but Baum in the early 70s had found Ponstingl's work, and he had a show, and he would staple them to the walls and to the ceiling. So some of them weren't on stretchers. So I ended up picking this one. I called it Blue Steel. As time wore on, I found out.
John.
Yeah, this was the one. It was never stretched, so I laid it out on the ground outside, not on a stretcher, and I said to Larry Grimm, he patiently waited around, and I said, I want that one. And Larry said, no, not just that one. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you have to buy all of them. I'm not an art dealer. I'm just a collector. I rummaged through this house for hours. That's, you know, he said, all or none. So that's what started everything. And there were 13 of them. Then I took them back home. Then I started getting them stretched and some clean. And all my friends would come over and they started, can I buy that piece? And I just wouldn't sell them. And I started to fall in love. They were just fantastic.
What other ones besides this one? Are there others in the exhibition? Was this the soldiers? Is that in that group?
Yeah, none of these were in the 13. There's some great ones that are in the 13. Wait a minute, not that one now. Wait a minute. I can't remember if that, you're going back 14, 15 years. I have it written somewhere, but.
So some of these might have been in that.
Yeah, that blue one was for sure. Yeah. That one may have been. There was one or two. No, not that one. Yeah, there were.
This one.
So that's where it started.
That's the end of the slide.
That one might have been.
Yeah.
That was one of the first ones. That was one of my favorites also.
Mm-hmm.
So that's.
And what about his work really appealed to you, or why do you think you were so drawn to it?
I mean, I like Lichtenstein, and I started with, appreciating Thomas Hart Benton, and there's a local artist, Rad Miller, and the energy and colors, and I would call it a glow or hum. Mm. And he had that graphic thing down, and the colors, and when you would clean them or hang, God forbid, some of them were in closets. I mean, so I would hang it, and it looked like it had an energy to it, and almost like they were glowing in the dark. Mm.
I think this is, and we were talking about, John and I were talking about this work earlier, this is an unfinished painting, but I think that's a good example of what you call like that hum, the way he's got this gradation of grays coming out from what seems like a very traditional still life painting, right? But Ponstingl has still found a way to like energize it and make it different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do you mind, John, just talking a little bit about, because you've told me before of some kind of personal connections you feel with Ponstingl, and with these two works in particular that aren't on display, as I said, in the exhibition, but were displayed at the Michener in 2016.
This is a very interesting pair. This was the second obsession. So through finding in my search information on who had collected early Ponstingls, I found 19 paintings in an abandoned home. Not an abandoned home, but the person had passed away and their brother lived next door, and it was in the house next door that was empty. So there was a room filled with 19 Ponstingls. And I don't mean beautifully framed, and it wasn't in a museum setting, to say the least. So I went in, and these were rolled up like the Declaration of Independence. And I started to unroll, and I got the shakes. They were fantastic. And that one with the soldiers was in there as well.
Oh, okay.
So I ended up taking these and bringing them home, putting them on my driveway, and I had weights in the garage, and I put them on the four corners so I could see them open. And my friend came down the driveway, and he wanted to buy them right away. I mean, and so in this painting, both of these, as strange as it might sound, so inauspicious upbringing, there's me on the railroad tracks, I feel. In this one, I became a musician as I was older. There's the trumpet. Out of the trumpet is coming nuts, bolts, and screws. I buy and sell machinery all over the world that manufactures fasteners. So there's pieces of my life in these paintings. As strange as it was, I thought it was meant to be that I find this guy and give him his due somehow. And these were just beautiful paintings, so yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing, the old gentleman who owned these, it was 19 paintings. He said, all or none. And I said yes again.
Sure.
Why not?
Just take them. Yeah, and I mean, it's almost like Ponstingl was calling out to you to come, to come and collect him and promote him after his death.
Yes.
And I mean, it's fascinating, and some of you might have picked up on this already, but Ponstingl would repeat kind of symbols throughout his paintings. So this kind of, the work on the left, End of Days, that top right corner, all those different symbols you see elsewhere in paintings in the exhibition. So like this work here, which is hanging in the exhibition, has this similar kind of background or pattern of different shapes. So and same with the, oh, I forgot I have a laser pointer. Same with like these, I don't know, I think of them as like periscopes. What do you think these are, John?
I think it's a machine or a time travel machine.
Huh.
He was very into time travel,
like
aliens,
the ships,
a lot
so you
of,
see it here.
as you can see by the paintings, he was a little out there. So.
Yeah, but I like this repetition of different subjects and forms. I think
guess it's a common
interesting.
OCD or whatever he wanted to expand upon.
He's fixated.
Yes.
He's fixated. So these are Pilgrims Landing at Plymouth Rock, and I love how it's like the ships are coming through almost like a portal from another dimension in the background.
Yeah.
So it takes that kind of classic American story and flips it on its head, like as alien invaders. Right, and this is a recent work you acquired, is that right? Yeah.
I mean, he was very topical and ahead of his time.
Right, because this was actually added to the show later on. John emailed me and was like, "What do you think about this one?" It's like, let's put it up, you know.
And that's 1963, I think, or 65.
64,
I mean,
so in the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Ponstingl's earlier style is much more, Dali inspired, but more representational in its subject matter, and then kind of later in the 70s he gets more abstract. So we see some more abstract
morphed into where he went. And he was never evidently satisfied with his works. He would say it was shit, it wasn't good enough, and go on to the next one. Never satisfied. And the one large painting, if you could go back to those two.
So the two in the front.
There's something interesting. Now, that figure on the tracks, that's Frank. He called himself a gyrovag. And that's a real word, but gyrovag, like a traveling itinerant monk of some sort, living on the charity of others, and he just, and that in the top right corner, if you laser it.
Right up here?
Yeah, that's an eyeball. That's him looking at his life. We think.
From like a maze almost up here.
Yeah. And it's literally about the height he was, because he was a shorter fella. Anyway.
Any other symbolism in this painting? I mean, there's so much going on here.
I feel this is about the time when his father was getting sick or maybe close to passing away, and he didn't want the family to get rid of the farm. They had a family farm in Koopsburg, Allentown, and I think that's the farm floating away from him, the roots, his life disappearing. Yeah. And he wasn't happy about that. Yeah.
So how did you find, when you started collecting Ponstingl, he was pretty much unknown in a lot of ways. As you said, dealers knew about him, but not much was known about his life or anything. Can you tell us a little bit about how you learned more about him and what surprised you about what you learned once you kind of pieced his history together? John, I should mention, John really is like the keeper of Ponstingl's history in a lot of ways. He did a lot of research and looked into his background and brought his story back to our attention.
And everybody loves a find. We all know if Granny had a 1962 Corvette with 20,000 miles in the garage and you uncover that, you're really happy. It's fun. Mm-hmm. And that's what this is like. Yeah. And the outsider art movement right now, and to find something like this, to me, was so fun. So I guess fast forward, if you look at what was going on, I should say reverse, because at his time in the early 70s, you have a shy fella, wasn't really engaging. He could have taken his pieces and taken the bus or the train into the city, went to New York and said, what do you think? Can I do something? He wasn't that guy. So shy, introverted, maybe a little snooty. So at the time in this area, you have Redfield, Schofield, Radmiller, and even those paintings were bringing, what, $2,000, $3,000 max back in the 70s or 80s. So who around this area would want something as crazy as that back then? And there were some people, believe it or not, in the area who would spend $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 for some of his work back in the early 70s. We have records of it, which is strange. Most of the people would, want something that's normally in the museum here, a local landscape artist, a Garber or something. So I think the dealers were not going to put him on the wall because he wasn't in vogue. And this wasn't New York or LA, somewhere that they would want to experiment and do something strange like this. And I think that frustrated him. So all these years go by, then it turned into the Bucks County Modernist, who you guys here are all aware of from the museum, the works over the years. Keep in mind, now you're getting into the 70s and 80s, he's still in the background. And this area is not ready for this crazy nonsense yet either. But now is when the dealers, 80s, getting into the 90s, start to see his stuff at auction. So people buy them because they're fun, whimsical, and cheap. So then here we are, I come along how many years later, and I get this discovery in my head, and I really love the work, and now I guess right place, right time.
So how did you find out more about him, and what was surprising to you, or what didn't you, or what were you intrigued to learn about him once you learned more about his background and life?
I guess the sad thing to learn, but poetic, he really was a true artist. He lived his life from start to finish obsessing on painting. And that's all he wanted to do. And that's all he did. If he was in some job and someone put him the wrong way, he just left and he'd go and paint. It's all he cared about. And sadly, I found out, I didn't know this, he was homeless at times in California, in Oregon. I think he might have been a little, he might have had some issues, and I don't think he went the norm, with society. Like I said, if someone rubbed him the wrong way, he'd just walk out the door, and I don't think he cared. So.
And he did, he served time in the military, and so I think that probably greatly impacted his kind of outlook on the world as well. Yeah,
so a real strong-willed character that did what he wanted to do. You have to respect someone that gives up their entire life and sticks with the dream. And that's what I found. I really appreciated, and it was sad to realize that he was homeless at times, and so there's some of the things that really stick with me.
Yeah. What do you wish you knew about him? If he was here today, what would you want to ask him?
The goddamn titles to some of the paintings. We can't. I mean, some of the titles are spectacular. He was such a character. The names are fantastic, but there's so many missing titles.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, here's an example. Untitled, which you call Blue Steel, which I think.
But I don't rename them. But I just keep like this. We actually have a name for and that. Yeah, but.
Bats Out of Hell.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and we found.
That's a real title, which is strange, but.
Yeah, we found. And you probably know this too, but on the backs of some of these paintings, there's titles written. But as John mentioned, Bert Baum who had a gallery in Sellersville. He's the son of Walter Baum, who, a Pennsylvania Impressionist, many of you know. But Bert Baum found like a large collection of Ponstingl's work at the Philadelphia Salvation Army. And I forget when, it's 1970, around that, 69 or 70. So because Ponstingl, as John mentioned, was kind of fed up with, he wasn't getting the success he wanted here in this area, so he just dropped all of his work off and then, made plans to move out west. But Baum found someone at the Salvation Army contacted Bert Baum. Baum found his work and displayed it in his gallery in a number of exhibitions. And we found several newspaper articles all the way through the 70s and even early 80s, advertising Ponstingl's work on display at Baum's Sellersville Gallery. But it's, John and I have talked a little bit about this, but this relationship between Bert Baum and Ponstingl, I think it was a little tricky. You've told me that Ponstingl did get a commission, for example, for some of his work, so he did get some money, but did he get all the money? I don't, who knows. And then Baum also, I think, might have written titles on the back of some of the works, too, so we can't be sure exactly.
I know, because I could tell by the writing, and Frank did not like that.
Yeah, there's let me pull up. So this one, Isotopes of Furniture, it's great. Don't ask me what that means, or I don't know if you have any insight. Yeah, but on the back of this painting, it says Mars Residences is one of the titles. And in, the newspaper articles we've seen about Baum's exhibitions, he was really trying to connect Ponstingl's work to like the movie Star Wars and other kind of like sci-fi movies that were really popular at the time too. And I think probably people who saw this work kind of made these connections also, even if it wasn't intended by Ponstingl.
Makes sense at the period,
because they are sort of like, kind of sci-fi and inspired, and I imagine that Ponstingl saw a lot of the movies that were popular at the time.
He was ahead of his time in a lot of ways.
And I also, you talked a little bit about how you found many of these paintings rolled up in this work. Another great title, Tale of Bifurcations Through the Ages. Very much Dali inspired, but if you see this painting in person, it has this strange text made of these different H and Y shapes they're repeated throughout this massive work, like 90 inches high. John had it stretched and restored for the exhibitions, because when I first saw it at John's house, it was rolled up in the attic, so he hadn't had a chance to stretch it yet, and I was like, that's awesome. John's like, do you want me to do it? You want me to get it ready? And I was like, all right, sure. And now it's one of the centerpiece artworks in the exhibition, so it's really quite wonderful. So at the museum, we've discovered that the longer you look at a Ponstingl, the more you see. And I think I can give you a couple examples, because there's a few things that this is a good one. So Phantom Rider, when we were installing the exhibition, one of our preparators who collected this piece from, is it Aylin or Island?
You shouldn't lead the witness, see if they can see what's going on. You should let them guess, though.
Can you see anything in this painting? I should probably start there. Yeah. What do you see? You guys are nodding. I'll put you on the spot. Oh, you already saw it. Okay.
And we stared at it for several minutes trying to find it, but then we finally did.
Got it. Can anybody find the writer? They got some nods. So again, this was pointed out to me by our art preparators who had picked up this work from Eileen Green. And she mentioned it to them. They were like, "So it's so cool that there's an actual writer in there." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" So I hadn't seen it. But
do you know who told Island?
Her kids, right?
Her children found it. I sold it to Island. I didn't even know. She didn't even know. Her children found it.
So if you think of these are the wheels. There's kind of a figure with like an outstretched arm here.
The Ghost Rider.
And then there's some sort of like animal, I think, here. I was talking with someone today who was wondering if it was like a motorcycle. But to me, this is an animal, like a horse that's like, the legs are moving so fast that you can see the different
spirit guide,
the different movements of the legs. Anyway, but that's something that I didn't even see until it was up on the wall of the exhibition, and I very quickly wrote a label for it. And then also this work too. I mean, if you see it in person, there are so many layers, like little figures back here, and there's clouds in the sky, even though it looks like a crumpled blueprint in one corner. Is there anything, John, that you've seen in the works in your collection that have surprised you, or you didn't see until someone else pointed it out? A child, perhaps?
Yeah, exactly. That's the one key. Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And this one as well. The more you look and stare, and I had so many of them, I didn't have a chance to put many of them even on the wall and stare at them.
Right.
So, yeah, you keep seeing more and more, and yeah.
It's really fun to take groups through this exhibition, because every time I go through with another group, someone sees something that I hadn't seen before, or thinks of a reference that I hadn't thought of before. So I think Ponstingl's work really invites that.
Yeah.
And I remember, I'm going to let you tell this story, but could you tell the story of how when you first wanted to start collecting, you were looking at a completely different subject matter and someone gave you some good advice?
Yeah. I was in a gallery looking at some Hudson River School paintings, and there was an older gentleman walked in, and I was looking at the trees. I don't know, it was Jasper crops or whatever. And he said, "That's cute." He said, "You're going to fall out of that in about a couple of years, 2, 3. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "That's going to bore you." I said, "The Hudson River School painting is going to bore me." He said, "You'll see."
Yeah.
He was right.
You won't be bored. You know?
Yeah. You run into some characters at the galleries, and that, yeah, some people are pretty wise.
Yeah. So why do you think Ponstingl's work is appealing now, or getting greater interest now, you know, so many years after his death?
I think the discovery of it, the story, is fascinating and fantastic. It's just, yeah, it's him getting his due. The work stands on its own. It's just got so much energy. It's so well done. He was so talented. And again, no one's seen it. A lot of these pieces haven't been seen since 1970, and some were never seen, never, because of his sad story.
Yeah. I also think they kind of resonate with our, you know, he painted them in a tumultuous time politically and, you know, and globally, and I think we're kind of in a similar time now, and I think it's, in some ways, I think his work kind of is very timely, and I think we can connect it to kind of current things that are happening. I mean, dystopian fiction is having like a resurgence right now, and I think his paintings kind of tie nicely into that trend.
There's one in the catalog. It's a smaller piece, and it has stick figures.
Oh, yeah.
But all different colors of stick figures, I would assume, associating the tribes. You know, all the different nations that are here. And I would call it all together just to reference it when it was somewhere in my home to know where it was. But yeah, I mean, very topical. The Pilgrims, I mean, that's before that Indian commercial when we were kids, you know, everybody littering. I mean, the guy's real. And
he's I think he's critiquing the kind of heroic myth of the Pilgrims settling in the area. Yeah, and he was, and we haven't mentioned this yet, but you did bring up those stick figures, and then also he was well traveled. I mean, he did travel to South America, and he was inspired by archaeology and the kind of Mayan and Aztec ruins and art that he saw there as well. So a lot of that kind of inspired some of his designs and paintings too. So he was looking at art from different cultures as well. Yeah. So what other artists are you interested in? We've talked a lot about Ponstingl. Does your interest in collecting art expand to other work? Yeah,
I mean, I like local, you know, Adolf Conrad and Joseph Zink and Rad Miller and Michener, some local. I love, you know, Garber, Redfield. I love all of it. You know, there's some local young artists. You know, there's Rye Tippett. There's Malcolm Bray. There's another friend of mine, Lauren Johnson. And then, you know, we get into Marilyn Minter and the city, or, you know, and Liechtenstein and all the great things that are out there. But I think, you know, next when I start with another, it might be some student artists from, you know, somewhere in the city. I'll go with my friend Kathy, and that might be the next phase. You're
plotting your next obsession.
Yes,
Well, we look forward to seeing who that is.
I remember we had a show in New Hope Arts years ago, and one of the people from Rego, I think it was Mick, he looked around the room and it was filled with Ponstingls. He said, "Are these all yours?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you think you got a little carried away?" Yeah. In for a penny, in for a pound.
And what advice do you have for aspiring art collectors today, for someone who wants to get into art, doesn't know where to begin?
I would say, just like someone told me, get the books out, start learning, go to museums, go to galleries, learn, see what you like, go to auction houses, look at local artists. I mean, you want to be part of your community and what's local, and have part of a connection to where you are, and have something maybe to, God forbid, to leave to a kid or grandkid or relative, or something that's a piece of you, that's a piece of the area, and when you were here. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I mean, that's how I feel about it. You know, throwaway disposable items are not my cup of tea, and I know, you know, everything's disposable now, but God forbid we have something we're proud of and we're passionate about, and you know, we can share with people.
No, I like your what you said about looking locally.
Yeah.
I think the Michener is a good place to learn more about local art. And we have some good contemporary art shows that are coming up, so stay tuned. So on that note, I'd like to, you know, make sure, I know some people here have questions, so I'd like to turn it over to the audience, if anyone has questions for John or I. Yes?
We've got a couple. I noticed in the exhibition, and most of the things shown up here in addition, all the works lie between like 66 and 72, with 2 exceptions in there. Did he paint beyond before or beyond that? Are there more works there somewhere? Do we know what he did?
Good question. He started in late 50s. 59, his first show was at the Coopersburg drugstore, I think in 1959.
I didn't even know that.
Where he did a painting of a cone head, which became a skit for Saturday Night Live. So, did somebody years ago find that painting and come up with that skit from that painting? So, yeah, anyway. And then he painted, and you see the style he had earlier on. So, he painted maybe from, say, 59 to maybe 64, 65. And then you can see in 66, he changes. He starts to morph into this, the one with the center machine in the middle. And he starts... that one.
This one.
Yeah, this is where he starts to go in 66. So the earlier ones, like the Pilgrims and such, that was the earlier stuff. And then he morphs into this real graphic stuff like this, into late 60s, early 70s. And then he kind of fades away. And he started sketching, he did sketches. And also, since he was so much of a grifter, he only had the space to work with where he lived. When he would have to scale down and move from the big farm, from the family, and he would be in a little apartment in D.C. or a little apartment in Allentown, he would paint smaller pieces. And then when he would get disgruntled again and move to California, he stopped painting. And it's a big mystery to us how much and if he really did paint when he went to California.
Because we do have the drawings that we have in the exhibition, we believe, are from when he was in California.
Mid-late 70s, yeah.
Because he didn't really have the space or really a lot of money at the time to like have materials, and but he was, we think, still sketching. And then some of those sketches, I think, inspired some of his later work when he came back to the area and lived with his sister in Kunkletown.
But I think you know, the run was maybe 59 to maybe 72 was the bulk of it. And a few things maybe mid to late, but they were not much and smaller.
I kind of think of going out to Oregon and looking in Salvation Army's places.
Believe me, yeah. I had a lot of ideas for 14 years, and I ran down the path with a lot of them, and I came up with some interesting pieces. But yeah, the passion continues. You never know. You're right. You never know what rock is unturned somewhere. Right.
And maybe as more news of Ponstingl spreads, I mean, things could come out of the woodwork. Yeah. Possibly even on
I know where more are, but yeah, it's been a long journey.
The other question I had is, has anything been written about him, or when Baum did exhibitions, were there any like little catalogs, anything that's in print about him at all?
I had a little piece of paper from one of his shows, which was a small bio, and I think
we found some newspaper references to the gallery exhibitions. Yeah. I don't know if he did catalogs.
You found out more than I did.
Yeah,
on the articles.
just by doing a deep dive in newspaper databases. But then, and I don't even know. We'll send you that information if we haven't already. But do you think he would have done catalogs, Bert Baum, for his shows?
No.
I mean, just
from what I know and think.
You described
if you staple
up on the
paintings to the ceiling and the wall, I don't know if you got to do a
And I've seen some photographs of the inside of his gallery, and it was not a very. It's not what we're accustomed to seeing in an art gallery. It was pretty cluttered and disorganized. So, but he did have a bio. It sounds like, so that's something.
Little sheet of paper, and they sold them.
Mm-hmm. There really hasn't been much written about Ponstingl except at the Baum School of Art. There was an exhibition of Ponstingl's work recently, and there was a catalog that John helped put together that's on sale in our gift shop too. But that's kind of the only thing that's really been written about Ponstingl.
The most informative. And a friend of mine, Dr. Catalina Batista, in the city, she taught at Oxford, she teaches at the Sotheby's Institute now, she's written numerous books. She helped compile everything. So it's properly written. It's a very nice, interesting, informative catalog on him.
Mm-hmm. And in the January issue of American Art Review, there is our curatorial assistant here, Tara Kaufman, who did a lot of research for the exhibition. She wrote a nice essay about Ponstingl, and there's many works from the exhibition that are reproduced in that magazine. And Arts and Antiques Journal next month should have a piece about Ponstingl in the exhibition too. So keep your eyes peeled. Yes.
So with surrealism in general and Ponstingl in particular, should one just accept the visual impact and enjoy that, or is it fruitful to try to find some deeper meaning?
Since he's gone, all we can do is, that's one thing I wish we could chat with him or someone. But it's just all we can do is appreciate it and take it down our own path.
Yeah, but it's fun to speculate.
Yeah.
I think the work encourages speculation.
Yeah.
And, you bring your own kind of background to the work too. And I think what's so tempting about the work is it suggests that there's like a key to unlock some deeper meaning, and it's just out of reach. And I don't think we'll ever know exactly what it means, but it's still, I mean, that's what I love talking about this work with other people, because I think everybody has a different idea, a different opinion. And maybe Ponstingl would have enjoyed that, the fact that people bring all these different ideas. I mean, he was also inspired by, surrealism, and he was inspired by his dreams. So some of them I think are purposely not meant to make sense.
And aliens, evidently.
Yeah.
If I could ask a second question?
Yeah.
His hieroglyphics in the background, are they constant from picture to picture, from work to work, or are they different?
They seem to be different. And we don't know if from his travels.
Like these two are very different. These two that are up in the show are they're this lang, and I'm sorry, it's such you can't see a lot of detail, but there's a lot of, they're very different in terms of the
And again, the
stuff.
aliens. So we don't know if there's an alien language mixed with some hieroglyphics of some sort in his own, who knows?
Right, yeah. I think he was really inspired by Egyptian hieroglyphics, but then also what he saw in Mayan archaeological artifacts and the Aztec. And so he was kind of thinking about, he was really interested in language in general, whether or not it's meant for aliens. I mean, I think he liked this idea of making his own language, which I'm not entirely sure can actually be interpreted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too that in this piece, most of the images in the background are tools of some sort.
Yeah. He was very mechanical.
And he seems to be fascinated with mechanical things.
Yes.
Except the central thing is that same flowing, organic feeling that he also blends in. And I'm sitting here trying to think, what is he saying?
Yeah.
It's a great question.
It is. Yeah.
We all wonder.
Like a swing thing in the middle of, it almost looks like a tentacle.
Again, is that one of his time machines that reoccur in some of the paintings? Who knows?
Yeah, and to me, this almost looks like a roller coaster. I always think of it like a roller coaster. I mean, what I thought, because this looks so much like almost like a blueprint, and it's even crumpled up here in the corner. Some of these shapes, they come off of this two-dimensional plane too. So I read it, and if you read my label, you would notice this, but I read it as like an idea coming to fruition, coming from writing on a page, coming to actualized object or thing. Again, that's my that's my take, and feel free to argue with that, but this work in particular, I feel like invites a lot of close looking and there's a lot of layers of things happening in this painting. Yeah, Alice.
So everyone I've talked with is incredulous that he did not have formal art training. Do you have any thoughts on how he became so technically good?
You are correct. He had he's an outsider artist, believe it or not, that painted like that. And he came home from the service, and his first paintings, he went to the farm, like Michelangelo, set up scaffolding and laid on his back and copied the masters on the ceiling of the farmhouse. And I have an earlier painting of him from, I think, 1961. It's kings holding court. I mean, it's nothing like this, but this is where he started. Yeah, classic outsider, untrained artist for sure.
Do you think he could have had draftsman training at all in the service or so? Because it is so
He was
exact.
A draftsman,
yeah.
and yes, but I don't know if he had that. I can't corroborate that.
Yeah.
No idea.
I'm just curious.
Do you know how he did it? I mean, it sort of looks like some is done with pen and some with a very fine brush.
I know.
You don't see any errors or any recovering.
Very precise, yes.
No sign of extra paint on the painting. It's just black.
He used a fan brush, I know. That's why he used a fan brush a lot. It looks very faded and almost like airbrush, people used to say, I heard in the 70s. But he used a fan brush for a lot of it.
Yeah, I haven't even noticed really any underdrawing or anything like that in his work. I mean,
Well, keep in mind on the unfinished dining.
It's
there's
true. There
numbers.
are. That is true. So I guess that's
So maybe
a good
he
point.
sketched precisely and numbered, and then when he blew it up to scale, there's numbers in there.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't know if that coordinated to his colors or his
So
scale.
he did. So he did kind of draw underneath.
Yeah.
Right. Lori.
Hi, John.
Hi.
I'm wondering how much of the work do you actually live with in your home versus in storage? Because I know you've got a lot.
Lori hasn't been to the house, has she?
No.
I haven't.
There's
Well,
really nothing in storage, is there?
No.
I mean, there's things. Last time I was there were things kind of stacked up in the house.
Oh, yeah.
But they were still out.
Yeah, I have some other
Yeah.
friends who are obsessive collectors, and they're under the bed and in the closet and on the walls and stacked against some bedroom. Yeah, so there's probably maybe at least 7 on the walls.
Okay.
8,
Yeah.
9, and then they're layered throughout.
Yeah. And you
Hidden.
have some things in the attic, I guess.
Yeah.
Too.
Some things are hidden,
Yeah.
stashed. Yeah.
But you live with them.
Yes, I
Yeah,
do,
a
for
lot-
sure.
Yeah. They're up in the house. Yes.
Do you have any plans for the future of your collections?
That's a good question. I mean, more shows showing him.
But I mean, even beyond when you're not even here.
Oh, I know what you're saying. When I'm with Ponstingl.
For posterity. I mean,
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? I'm sure you're thinking about how to preserve this.
I didn't think of that. God forbid I have an estate and a planning of some of these things, but yes, that needs to be talked about.
The question I had was, and I'm not even comparing these two or putting them in the same category, but an interesting ride would be to see a David Lynch exhibition, because I saw his exhibition down at PACA. Not a whole lot of people know he was a student at PACA before he became a filmmaker.
Did you see that show, John?
No.
And then I just went, over Thanksgiving, I was in New York City where my sister lives, and they had a small exhibition of his work there. And it's pretty over the top. I mean, you want to question something, that's a very interesting journey. So I recommend that if you have an opportunity.
Yeah.
I'll definitely
Like
go.
that kind of, puzzle or
Sure.
challenge.
Thank you.
I have to think what to do with this stuff. You're right. Yeah. Can you imagine something happens? What do we do with John's paintings? Is he great? What do we do? Yeah.
Exactly.
We'll take some.
Put them in the trash.
I saw a hand.
You know that's what some relatives would say, right?
Yeah. Don't put it in the trash. Hand back there in the red. Yeah.
Do you have plans to add to your collection?
Oh, that obsession continues. I mean, if I see something and I get the sweats over it, I'm going to have to do something. There are certain pieces I can't live without.
Do you like more, like, is there a particular style of his work that you like especially? I mean, I know you just acquired the Pilgrims painting, but are there, do you like this kind of style, or do you like the more abstract style?
I love that, but I love the more abstract.
Yeah.
The one that's in the front of the show, the soldiers to me is unbelievable.
Right.
That
Like
is
this one.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Seed to Seed is unbelievable. I just love that glow and that energy and the morphic. I mean, I love those
Yeah.
biomorphic pieces or whatever. Yeah.
Because it's
The colors and.
Because you've also seen work by Ponstingl that's more like he's trying to do Pennsylvania Impressionism, right?
And there was
like
a
he's
reason
trying to
for
do
that.
some landscape painting.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the market, right?
Yeah, he was trying it.
But you don't own any of those.
I would not. No. Nope.
So Ponstingl kind of experimented with some of his styles to sell more,
Yeah.
right? And so he was trying to do kind of more traditional landscapes. And I actually haven't seen any of those paintings. You said you've seen them before, but I haven't.
They're classic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't uncovered them.
He
in
didn't
my
even sign his name.
work.
He changed
That's
the
I
name.
guess that's why. Yeah.
Yeah. He did like a classic, maybe not like Garber Redfield, but he did it would be like, Leith Ross maybe or
Okay,
something.
yeah.
And then he put some weird name on it. And they were well done, but no one bought them. It's just that, the whole thing frustrated him. And that's the sad thing, but the poetic thing about him to just never give up
Yeah.
to the end.
Yeah. Alice.
Did you get to talk with any of his family members who are still alive to find out what kind of person he was beyond what you've already said?
I did. Yeah, and there's kind of one person, but there's not a lot left. There's not a lot of people left. Everybody's getting older, and Frank's gone. So, and he's been gone for quite some time, so it's difficult. So I tried to, get all the information I could. So I think I know about as much as I can possibly know without talking to him.
So what kind of things can you tell us about him?
I think, again, he was very passionate about the art, and it's all he wanted to do. I think, at one point, I think he was a drinker in the old days, and I think maybe there was some sort of an accident, and I think in the 50s, and that was it. He was done. So he never drank anymore, and I think a woman broke his heart at one point, and he just figured to live his life and constantly paint. He didn't care. And, if something ticked him off at a job, he'd just leave.
What did he do for work?
He was a draftsman at times. He was very mechanical. So I know in California he worked at some kind of an aerospace junkyard, I think. Also...
And interior design, too, right?
Yes.
When he was in D.C.
When he was in D.C., the Officers Club, the Bowling Officers Club, I think it was called, he was the maintenance man. And Bobby Baker, the infamous politician Bobby Baker, that worked under the Lyndon Johnson administration, he took a liking to Frank, and I think Frank did some murals for him. And there was a place called the Carousel Club in Maryland, and I think Frank painted murals there. So he was kind of a painter, handyman, very mechanical. And he was always fascinated with mechanical things since he was young.
Yeah. We reached out to the Bowling Officers Club because reportedly he painted murals there too.
Yeah.
At least according to the family, but
Yeah.
they were like, what, murals?
No.
So
Yeah, but
it was,
is anyone-
but it's not. It's
is
hard
anyone
because it's an
there
army
from-
base.
Yeah.
Like how do you?
And it's so
hard to
long
get
ago.
records,
Right.
from that long ago too,
Right.
about what was on the walls.
But I
They're
bet
not
so-
there today.
Yeah,
So we don't
yeah.
know what the murals would have looked like. I can only imagine. I guess if he can paint in different styles, it probably wasn't quite what we
No.
see in the exhibition, but
Yeah.
probably a little fanciful. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he just lived a passionate artist life. And and I know he traveled often and loved to travel. And I don't think he cared much about money.
Yes.
There's a little current of almost nihilism, underlying his work. What did he do in the service? What was his, do you know?
Wow. I don't know what he did. I know he wasn't infantry.
Because it almost seems like, I won't say PTSD, it's overused, but it
Yeah.
seems like he was very effective, the soldiers particularly.
Yeah, I think he was a draftsman. But he did walk around after Hiroshima. So you're right. I think there was definitely some issues, and he saw some things that maybe, weren't so pleasing, and might have done some things to his psyche, sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the Hiroshima became really like almost, I don't want to say a tourist site, but people would come from, that were stationed in that area to come to just see what had happened there, and he took advantage of that and made that trip, and I think it had a profound impact on him.
And you discovered, I mean, what you had said, Laura had brought up these things that I didn't even think of after your shit, the way those paintings are almost like DNA melted together or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you touched on something that I never even thought of that probably makes sense after.
I mean, there's a lot of concern, in the 60s and 70s about radiation and nuclear energy and what kind of impact that has on our bodies and ourselves. And this is also around the same time when DNA is visualized as like the double helix that we're so familiar with. So I think he's thinking about these things because these really remind me of like DNA double helixes, but they're deformed and distorted, and like something's not right. There's mutation, a lot of mutation throughout many of his paintings.
And him always, again, like, trying to expand on the same thing. A circle done, a circle done, a circle in one painting. It's just he wants to get it out and he can't.
Yeah.
And then he thinks it's not good enough and goes on to something else. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then that's not good enough.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and computer-generated art. There's a piece I have that looks like computer diodes or something. There's a few pieces that no one's seen, but I mean,
like these kind of like a circuit board or something like that.
He was ahead of his time.
Yeah,
for sure.
He was.
So is there now an active market for him?
I mean, there's people that are interested in his work for sure. Yes. Yeah.
You see, Altafers just sold a few Ponstingls recently. Yeah.
Yeah, once in a while they come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was there any thought of how he made all these perfect lines and circles? I mean, did he use like drafting tools or what?
I don't know. That's another question. I wish I did know.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Everything's so precise.
Very exact.
And there would be signatures. People would argue with me. I would flip the page early on, and there would be some black magic marker or strange writing, and that's the title or that's Ponstingl's signature. I said, no, it's not. Because it would look like a 5-year-old did it with a crayon compared to him, even his signatures. And he has maybe 3 or 4 distinct signatures, and they're done a certain way. Mm-hmm. And I could look at it in 22 minutes if he did it, if he painted it with period.
Speaking of signatures, I assume you know this, John, although I remember when it came here, it was covered in the corners had cardboard
good luck
on it.
Deciphering that
but
one.
It's written in the same like symbols that the rest of the work is in. So it's his signature, but it has like the funny H's and Y symbols that are repeated throughout the I call it a manuscript, but because it reminds me of one, but the painting itself. So he's taken it to the next level.
And I think he painted those 2 large paintings that were in Death of Impressionism and that one in 1966. To paint those 3, the other ones are 6 foot by 8 foot.
Yeah.
And this is huge. To paint them and the time you would have to have and the patience to paint those. Yeah, I don't know. And he lived on. That's the other thing. Cheese sandwiches, tea, and cigarettes. That was his thing.
It's very healthy. It's surprising he lived as long as he did.
And he would binge. He would paint for days on end and not sleep.
It was an obsession.
Yep.
Yeah. I think we could take one more question if anybody has one more. Or thoughts or comments.
Do you know if he had any interaction with other artists at all?
That's a good question too. I don't know. We know he had to be looking, but did he ever? And again, he's in Coopersburg, Allentown, and that from his travels to these crazy exotic places, I don't know that he really interacted with many.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Bert Baum introduced him to anybody, or?
Because who would he engage with? I mean, if he saw any of the Impressionists, it wouldn't be his. I don't know what he would probably think he's above them or doing something different, and he wasn't so, sociable. So.
Mm-hmm. I saw one more question in the back.
Maybe a hard question
outside of it so technically accomplished.
I'll let Laura answer that one.
Oh, well. I mean, I don't think he can really be like categorized or put in a certain stylistic group, if that makes sense. I mean, I think surrealism was certainly inspiring to him. He is, you know, Dali, though, for example, was painting decades earlier, was still painting around this in the 60s as well, but Ponstingl, you know, he kind of, I've seen him tied before to, you know, past curators here have tied him to magic realism, which is also kind of, it has this very representational style, but with these kind of, you know, elements of strange, sort of otherworldly components. But Ponstingl, I think, is still a little different than that. Like, I think he's just bringing in inspiration from a lot of different areas, not just fine art like Dali, but then also I think he's looking at pop culture. I think he's looking at movies, at science fiction books. I think he's drawing from a lot of other different of influences. So I think he's hard to categorize. I mean, when he's painting these, you know, everyone is excited about like minimalism and conceptual art, and like that's what's being shown in New York galleries, and so it's like the antithesis of that. I mean, minimalism, and then you have like this excess in a way.
The academics can put it in a box. But I don't, you know. Yeah. Some people don't. I don't like putting things in boxes necessarily either, though, because I think there's more complexity here to what Ponstingl is doing. It's fantastic to see. What I thought was great and fantastic for other people to appreciate it, and when I talk to these people. The girl from Art and Antiques magazine interviewed me. For her to say, John, I look at things every day. I'm busy. I saw these images. I had to do this article now. To see other people so excited about it, it's fun. Yeah. It's nice to see. And it's nice to see for Frank. Hopefully somewhere he's hovering around with his thumbs up. Yeah, excited that it's finally being appreciated. Yeah. Well, that's a great note to end on. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, everybody.